I am going to examine the poem Kubla Khan in detail. I was guided to look here when I realized it might contain a message about what happened to the advanced ancient civilization. This was after I realized a couple of months ago that the art and literature we are taught about in school provide the main vehicles for teaching us the history we believe to be true, which I actually believe is a false historical narrative presented as truth. My name is Michelle Gibson. This is a typical portrait of Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the poet who is given the credit for writing Kubla Khan. Said to have been born in 1775 and died in 1827, he was a founder of the Romantic movement in England, which emphasized emotions and individualism, glorification of the past and nature, and preferring the medieval rather than the classical. He wrote the poem in 1797 and published it in 1816. He prefaced Kubla Khan when it was published by saying it was the result of an opium-influenced dream after he read a work describing Xanadu. The first line of the poem is, "In Xanadu did Kubla Khan." Kubla was the fifth Khagan of the Mongol Empire from 1260 until his death in 1294, and a grandson of Genghis Khan. He founded the Yuan dynasty in China in 1271, ruling as the first Yuan emperor until his death. Historically, Xanadu is an actual place, the ruins of which are in what was called the Chilingol League in Inner Mongolia. It was the capital of Kubla Khan's Yuan dynasty in China from 1271 until he moved it to Dadu, or today's Beijing. It remained his summer palace. This is an aerial view of where Xanadu was located in Inner Mongolia. Note the geometric shapes in the landscape and the snaky S-shaped river, signatures of the advanced ancient civilization. A stately pleasure dome, decree. By the way, there is a so-called granite dome named Stately Pleasure Dome in Yosemite National Park in California. Presumably, its name came from this poem, and while I am not saying this is actually Xanadu, I do believe this is infrastructure of the advanced ancient civilization. For rock climbing enthusiasts, it is said to have over 20 multi-pitch slab climbs, or slabs that are at different angles, less steep than vertical, and ascended by one or more stops involving anchoring climbers. This is what one looks like. Where Alph, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man. The river Alph may be an allusion to the Greek river Alpheus, which in Greek mythology was what the Greek god Alpheus became when he turned himself into a river going underground to chase a nymph who turned herself into a well. Down to a sunless sea. The theme of the underground river that was equated with the river Alpheus could be representing a subculture of Western esotericism. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground with walls and towers were girdled round. So wherever it was a big, big place. And there were gardens bright with sinuous rills. A sinuous rill is defined as a long winding channel, where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree. Incense is made from resin grains that burn and produce a fragrant odor. This is a picture of an incense cedar from Yosemite in California. Frankincense is another well-known incense-bearing tree found on the Horn of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. And here were forests ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. But oh, that deep romantic chasm which slanted down the green hill athwart a cedarn cover, a savage place, as holy and enchanted as air beneath a waning moon, was haunted by woman wailing for her demon lover. And from this chasm, with ceaseless turmoil seething, as if this earth in fast thick pants were breathing, a mighty fountain momently was forced, amid whose swift, half-intermitted burst huge fragments, vaulted like rebounding hail. A huge sudden explosion of water and ice? Or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail. So he also likened it to how it looks when a farmer threshes grain, separating the seeds from the plant. And mid these dancing rocks, at once and ever it flung up momently the sacred river. 5 miles, meandering with a mazy motion, through wood and dale the sacred river ran, then reached caverns measureless to man, and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. And mid this tumult Kubla heard from far ancestral voices prophesying war. There were many prophecies from ancient times that speak of times of trouble. The shadow of the dome of pleasure floated midway on the waves, where was heard the mingled measure from the fountains and the caves. It was a miracle of rare device, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. Ice? What caused the ice? A damsel with a dulcimer, in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. Abyssinia is the ancient name for the Ethiopian Empire in northeastern Africa, on what is called the Horn of Africa. Could I revive within me her symphony and song, to such a deep delight 'twould win me, that with music loud and long I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome, those caves of ice. Did the ancient ones use the power of sound to build? From my research over the years, I am sure that was one of the technologies they had at their disposal. And all who heard should see them there, and all should cry, "Beware, beware, his flashing eyes, his floating hair. Weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honey dew hath fed, and drunk the milk of paradise." So I found this particular image, which had the ending lines to the poem, seems fitting for what I understand to be the truth. Most of humanity has no idea about who they really are, as we have been made to forget. Have humans been unknowing pawns in an interdimensional war against the Creator and creation? I think so. So I didn't take you through this because I believe this poem is the result of a drug-induced dream. Whoever Mr. Coleridge was is giving us information about a very important civilization missing from our history books. Why do I say whoever he was? For one thing, I found this man today when I did an internet search for Samuel Taylor Coleridge, as if to say, tell my story too. Meet Samuel Coleridge Taylor, an English composer and conductor. He was a professional musician that received an appointment as a professor to teach at the Crystal Palace School of Music. He died young, however, at the age of 37. I had mentioned the Crystal Palace in the Scotland segment of this series because I find it impossible to believe that this plate glass and cast iron structure, said to be 3 times the size of St. Paul's Cathedral in London, was built to house the Great Exhibition in London's Hyde Park in 1851, and then was somehow moved to another location in London afterwards. I think it was already built by the advanced ancient civilization. I mean, look at the size of that thing. While he was said to be named for Samuel Taylor Coleridge, here is a comparison of Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Even though living in different time periods, there is a similarity in facial features, which reminded me of the similarities between these 2 portraits of James Francis Edward Stuart. In my video, An Explanation for What Happened to the Positive Timeline of Humanity and Associated Historical Events and Anomalies, I shared an extreme cold weather event in the historical record in Ireland between 1740 and 1741. Irish historian David Dixon talks about this little-known event in his book, Arctic Ireland. I explored the idea that this event was related to the hijack of the original timeline, and that this was the point where the new timeline was pinned. The Irish population endured 21 months of bizarre weather without known precedent that defied conventional explanation. The cause is not known. Shortly after I learned about the cold weather event in Ireland, I was connected to the mud flood community. I learned about the fantastic research that is being done by people looking at their own communities and other places around the world at strong evidence that there was a cataclysmic event involving a massive flood of mud as recently as 200 to 300 years ago. It is being called a reset event, and that the infrastructure was dug out by those who somehow caused it afterwards. Over the years, as I have filled my head with information about megaliths, long before I became aware of what I am sharing, I learned about such places as the Sphinx in Egypt having been dug out. As well as the famous heads of Easter Island that were found to have bodies too. The explanation of a mud flood makes a lot of sense to me based on what I am finding and seeing. A sudden cataclysmic event accounts for how a highly advanced worldwide civilization of giants could be wiped out and erased from our collective memory. This is an historic photo of St. Petersburg, Russia, a vastly smaller and hardly any people relative to the size of the city in the background and the foot in the foreground. I will end this video with a picture of the same place in St. Petersburg today.